The giant hand closed around the screaming soldier and squeezed until there was a wet crunch that silenced the man instantly. Blood dripped between the giant fingers and splashed onto the cobblestone street of the Trost District, where chaos was already reigning supreme. Cannons fired from the top of the wall, but the shells just bounced off the skin of the smiling monsters swarming into the city. A girl with dark hair and a red scarf swung through the air on steel wires and sliced the neck of a smaller giant, but there were too many of them. The city was dying. Suddenly, the grey sky above the breach in the wall twisted violently and turned a dark purple colour that looked like a bruise on the air itself. A deafening crack echoed across the entire district and shattered the windows of every building within a mile. Something small and fast shot out of that purple tear in the sky and slammed into the earth right in the middle of a group of 3 titans. The impact was like a bomb going off. A cloud of dust and broken street tiles rose high into the air. The shockwave knocked the 3 titans onto their backs and sent soldiers tumbling across the rooftops. The fighting stopped for a second because nobody understood what had just happened. Inside the crater lay a boy named Gohan, who was only 11 years old. He was wearing a purple outfit that was torn and stained with dirt, and he had a deep cut on his forehead. He gasped for air and tried to stand up, but his legs felt heavy. The last thing he remembered was standing in a dry wasteland fighting a monster named Cell, who wanted to blow up the earth. Gohan blinked his eyes and looked around through the settling dust. He did not see the wasteland anymore. He saw a city made of stone and wood that looked like it was from a history book. The air smelled terrible here. It smelled like old iron and sulfur and rotting meat. Gohan coughed and wiped the blood from his eye. He sensed for the energy of his father or his friends, but he felt nothing at all. It was as if the universe had gone silent. He tried to sense the energy of the monsters around him, but that was even scarier. The giant creatures standing up around the crater had no life energy. They were like moving dolls made of dead meat. One of the titans reached down toward Gohan with a wide grin on its face. It looked like a nightmare. Gohan did not know where he was, but he knew what killing intent felt like. The titan's hand came down fast to crush him. Gohan did not think. He just reacted. He raised his left arm and caught the giant finger that was as big as his whole body. He did not struggle. He stopped the hand completely. The ground under Gohan's boots cracked into a spiderweb pattern from the weight, but Gohan did not budge an inch. The titan looked confused and pushed harder, but Gohan just frowned. This monster was huge, but it was incredibly weak compared to the androids he had fought. Gohan pushed his hand up, and the titan was thrown backward as if it weighed nothing. It crashed into a bell tower, and the stone structure crumbled on top of it. A soldier on a nearby roof dropped his swords and stared with his mouth open. He had never seen a human toss a titan. Gohan floated up into the air until he was hovering 10 feet above the street. The soldiers watching from the walls gasped in horror because they thought he was a new type of monster. Humans in this world could not fly without wires. Gohan looked at the carnage around him. He saw the bodies in the streets. He saw the fear on the faces of the soldiers. He realized this was not a game. He clenched his fists tight. He was lost and alone in a world of nightmares, but he was still the son of Goku. He could not let these people die. A golden light began to flicker around his body, and the loose pebbles on the ground started to float upward. The air began to hum with power. The golden light flaring around the boy was not merely bright, but heavy, carrying a physical weight that pressed down on the lungs of every soldier in the vicinity. To the members of the garrison regiment stationed on the wall, the sudden appearance of a flying child was a hallucination born of panic. a desperate mind snapping under the threat of extinction. But the sound was real. The low, thrumming vibration of Gohan's energy rattled the roof tiles and made the water in the nearby troughs ripple in concentric circles. Gohan looked down at the street where the Titan he had just thrown was struggling to rise from the rubble of the bell tower. The monster's behavior confused him. In his world, an opponent knocked down with that much force would either stay down or rise with a counterattack prepared. But this creature moved with a clumsy, mindless determination, like a puppet with cut strings trying to walk. It did not seem to care that his arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. It simply snapped the bone back into place with a sickening crack and smiled that same vacuous nightmare smile. Gohan felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. The creature had no spirit, no ki, no intention. It was just a mass of consuming hunger. He needed answers, but first he had to stop the dying. He sensed the fading life fires of hundreds of people scattered throughout the stone city. They were terrified, their energies flickering like candles in a hurricane. He locked onto a cluster of screams nearby. With a burst of speed that created a sonic boom, shattering the remaining windows in the square, Gohan vanished from his hovering position. He reappeared instantly 3 streets over, where 2 15-meter titans were cornering a group of cadets who had run out of gas. The cadets, paralyzed by the lack of mobility and the sheer size of the predators, were huddled against a stone wall, their blades drawn in trembling hands. One of the titans reached down, its fingers spread wide to scoop up a girl with blonde hair. Gohan did not shout a warning. He did not have time. He dropped from the sky like a hammer, landing on the nape of the Titan's neck. He didn't know yet that the nape was the weak point. He simply struck the nearest solid mass. His small boot connected with the flesh, and the impact force was catastrophic for the Titan. The entire upper torso of the monster exploded outward in a shower of steam and bone. The Titan didn't just fall. It ceased to exist from the shoulders up. The shockwave of the kick flattened the second Titan against the building opposite, collapsing the structure on top of it. Gohan landed softly on the cobblestones between the cadets and the carnage he had caused. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the hissing of the dissolving Titan flesh. Connie Springer stared at the boy with eyes so wide they hurt. He had accepted death only seconds ago. He had watched the hand coming down, seen the fingerprints on the giant skin, and known he was going to be eaten. Now he was looking at a child who was smaller than him, wearing strange purple clothes, who had just detonated a Titan with a single kick. The steam from the corpse rolled over them, hot and smelling of sulfur. Gohan turned to look at the humans he had saved. His eyes were teal green, burning with an intensity that made Connie want to look away. Gohan's chest heaved as he tried to calm his breathing, not from exertion, but from the adrenaline of the unknown. He scanned their faces, looking for recognition, looking for Bulma, or Krillin, or anyone. He saw only strangers wearing brown jackets with the emblem of crossed swords and roses. They held box-like devices with blades attached, gear that looked primitive and heavy. Gohan spoke, his voice cracking slightly under the strain of the situation. He asked them where he was and if they had seen a monster named Cell. The language he spoke was intelligible to them, though his accent was strange, clipped and formal compared to the rougher dialects of the walls. Jin Kirstein was the first to find his voice, though it came out as a strangled rasp. He lowered his blade slightly, his mind refusing to process the visual data. He asked Gohan what he was, not who he was. To Jean, this had to be some new military experiment, or perhaps an abnormal Titan that looked human. But the boy was clearly human, just wrong. The air around him felt electric. Gohan didn't answer the question about what he was, because he was distracted by the second Titan pulling itself out of the collapsed building. The monster was missing half its face from the impact, but steam was rising rapidly and the flesh was knitting itself back together before Gohan's eyes. Gohan watched the regeneration with horror. It was just like Cell. The realization hit him like a physical blow. If these things could regenerate, then simple punches wouldn't be enough. He had to destroy them completely. The Titan lunged, moving faster this time, driven by the scent of fresh prey. Gohan didn't move his feet. He raised his right hand, fingers splayed open. He knew he had to be careful. If he used too much power, he would vaporize the city and everyone in it. He had to control his output, dial it down to a fraction of a fraction. He focused his Kai into a dense sphere the size of a baseball in his palm. He shouted a warning for the soldiers to get down. Then he fired. The blast was a beam of yellow light, thin and concentrated. It pierced the Titan's chest, traveled through the torso, and exited out the back, continuing on to carve a clean, cauterized hole through 3 subsequent buildings before fading into the sky. The Titan stiffened. The heat of the blast had been intense enough to incinerate the nape from the inside out, though Gohan didn't aim for it specifically. The creature collapsed, face forward, and began to steam away rapidly. Gohan looked at his hand, shaking. He had used too much power. The buildings behind the Titan were damaged. He could have hurt someone. He clenched his fist, angry at himself. He was the protector of Earth, the one his father had entrusted everything to, and here he was, firing blind in a populated area. He turned back to the cadets. He needed information. He asked again where he was. Jean, realizing that this boy was the only thing standing between them and death, swallowed his fear and answered. He told Gohan this was the Trost District, the southern gate of Wall Rose. He said they were under attack and the Titans were swarming the city. The names meant nothing to Gohan. Wall Rose, Trost. He had never heard of these places in geography class. Was he even on Earth? The gravity felt right. The air was breathable. But the energy was wrong. There was no background hum of life that he was used to. Suddenly, a flare went up in the distance. A black smoke signal. Gohan looked at it. He asked what it meant. Connie, still trembling, whispered that it meant an abnormal, a Titan that ignored nearby humans to target key locations. But then he corrected himself, saying that in this situation, it probably just meant the rear guard was being overrun. Gohan looked in the direction of the smoke. He could feel hundreds of those dead, empty voids moving toward that location. He made a decision. He couldn't stand here asking questions while people died. He told the soldiers to stay safe and find cover. Then, without bending his knees, he shot straight up into the air, levitating 20 meters above the rooftops. The sight of a human flying without wires broke something in Rainer Braun's mind. Rainer and Bertolt were watching from a rooftop 2 blocks away. They had been waiting for the right moment to act, to destroy the gate or blend in. But the appearance of the boy had frozen them in place. Rainer gripped the hilt of his blade until his knuckles turned white. He whispered to Bertolt, asking if this was the coordinate. Bertolt, sweating profusely, shook his head. He said the coordinate controlled Titans. It didn't fly. It didn't shoot beams of light. This was something else. This was outside the mission. This was outside of history. Panic began to set in for the warriors of Mali. If the people within the walls possessed this kind of technology or magic, the entire operation was suicide. Rainer watched the golden trail left by the boy as he sped toward the rear guard. He made a tactical call. They had to observe. They could not transform yet. If that boy could kill a Titan with a wave of his hand, He could likely kill a shifter just as easily. They had to know his weakness. Gohan flew over the city, and the scale of the disaster became clear. The gate was broken. Titans were pouring in like a river of nightmare flesh. There were too many to fight one by one without risking collateral damage. He needed to stop the flow. He saw the elite garrison squad fighting a losing battle near the breach. They were being picked out of the air like flies. Gohan accelerated. The wind whipped against his face, stinging his eyes, but he didn't blink. He reached the breach just as a 10-meter Titan was about to bite a soldier in mid-swing. Gohan intercepted the Titan mid-air, slamming his shoulder into its cheek. The Titan spun violently and crashed into the wall, embedding itself in the stone. The soldier, a woman with goggles named Rico, tumbled to a rooftop, gasping for air. She looked up and saw the boy floating in front of the hole in the wall. The Titans entering the breach paused. It was a primal hesitation. They sensed a predator. Gohan hovered before the gaping hole, a small silhouette against the encroaching darkness. He looked at the horde outside. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. He couldn't kill them all without leveling the landscape. He had to block the path. He looked around for a boulder, something massive, but the debris was too small. He would have to use force. He brought his hands to his waist, cupping them together. The blue light of the Kamehameha began to shine between his fingers. The soldiers on the wall screamed, shielding their eyes from the blinding radiance. They thought the sun had come down to earth. Gohan chanted the syllables, his voice carrying over the roar of the Titans. Kamehame. He thrust his hands forward. Ha! He didn't aim at the Titans. He aimed at the ground in front of the breach, just outside the gate. The blue beam slammed into the earth, digging a trench 10 meters deep and 50 meters wide in a split second. The explosion threw tons of rock and soil into the air. Gohan swept the beam sideways, carving a massive canyon in front of the gate. The Titans that were rushing forward fell into the pit, piling on top of each other. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it broke the momentum of the invasion. The dust cloud was enormous, obscuring the breach entirely. Gohan dropped his hands, panting. He had to be so careful. If he had angled that shot 1 degree higher, he would have taken out the wall itself. He floated down to the top of the wall, where the garrison commander, Kit Warman, was standing. Warman was a fearful man, prone to panic, and he was currently hyperventilating. He had his cannon crews aiming their weapons at Gohan. Gohan landed on the stone battlements. He raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. He told them he wasn't an enemy. He asked them to stop shooting the cannons because the shells weren't hurting the monsters anyway. Worman's eyes bulged. He screamed that Gohan was a demon, a sorcerer. He ordered his men to fire. The soldiers hesitated. They had just seen this demon save the gate, but the chain of command was iron. One soldier pulled a lanyard. The cannon boomed. Gohan watched the grape-shot shell coming toward him. It moved in slow motion. He didn't want to humiliate them, but he couldn't let them hurt him either. He caught the canister in his hand before it could detonate. The metal crumpled like paper. The gunpowder inside ignited, but Gohan smothered the explosion with his palm, containing the blast entirely within his grip. A muffled thump and a wisp of smoke from his fingers were the only evidence of the shot. He dropped the crushed metal to the ground. He looked at Warman with a gaze that was far too old for an 11-year-old face. He said that he didn't want to fight them. He said there were bigger enemies. He pointed to the Titans climbing out of the pit he had made. Before Warman could order a second volley, a figure landed between Gohan and the cannons. It was Dot Pixis, the commander of the garrison. He had arrived from the top of the wall, observing the blue light. Pixis was a man who appreciated gambling, and he knew a winning hand when he saw one. He raised his flask and took a swig, ordering his men to stand down. He looked at Gohan with curious hooded eyes. He introduced himself and asked the boy's name. Gohan stood at attention, a habit from his training with Piccolo. He said his name was Son Gohan. Pixis asked if Gohan was an ally of humanity. Gohan paused. He looked at the terrified soldiers, at the blood on the stones, at the smoke rising from the city. He thought of his father sacrificing himself against Cell. He nodded. He said he would protect them. But the situation was evolving rapidly. While Gohan had stalled the invasion at the main gate, Titans were still inside the city, hundreds of them that had entered before his arrival. And the supply depot, the headquarters for gas replenishment, was completely overrun. Without gas, the soldiers couldn't retreat up the wall. They were trapped on the rooftops, waiting to die. Gohan could sense the despair accumulating in one specific building. He asked Pixis where the people were. Pixis pointed to the large building in the center of the district. He explained the gas situation. Gohan didn't wait for further orders. He flared his aura again and took off. Inside the supply depot, Mikasa Ackerman was running on fumes. She had just led a suicide charge to clear the Titans from the archives room, but her blades were dull and her gas was gone. She sat on the ground, staring at a broken piece of glass. She had accepted that the world was cruel. She had heard that Eren was dead. There was no fire left in her, only cold resolve to take as many of them with her as she could. A Titan smashed through the window, its grinning face filling the room. The other cadet screamed. Mikasa stood up, raising her broken blades. She prepared to die. Then the roof exploded. It wasn't a Titan breaking in. It was something breaking in to kill the Titans. Gohan crashed through the ceiling tiles, landing directly on the head of the Titan, threatening Mikasa. He drove his fist downward, crushing the monster's skull into the floorboards. The building shook violently. Debris rained down. Gohan stood up from the corpse of the Titan. He looked around the room, seeing the terrified cadets huddled in the corners. He saw Mikasa standing there, her eyes dead and hollow. He recognized that look. He had seen it in the mirror after the Cell games. It was the look of someone who had lost their reason to live. Gohan walked over to her. He didn't know who she was, but he sensed her strength. It was dormant, depressed by grief, but it was there. He told her it wasn't over. He pointed to the window where more Titans were gathering. He said they needed to move. Mikasa looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the tears in his clothes, the blood on his forehead that wasn't his. She saw a boy who should be crying but was fighting. Something flickered in her eyes, a small spark. Outside, the Titans were swarming the depot. They were attracted to the concentration of humans. Gohan knew he couldn't fight inside without bringing the building down on everyone. He told the cadets to get their gas and get out. He would buy them time. He walked to the window. He stepped out onto the ledge. There were 20 Titans staring up at him. Gohan closed his eyes for a second, centering his key eye. He remembered Piccolo's training. Don't waste energy. Be precise. He opened his eyes. He vanished. For the cadets watching from the windows, it looked like a massacre. The Titans didn't just fall. They were dismantled. Gohan moved from one nape to another, striking with surgical precision. He didn't use energy blast this time. He used his hands and feet. He tore through the thick muscle of the Titan necks like they were wet paper. He was a blur of purple and gold. In 10 seconds, the courtyard was silent. 20 huge bodies lay steaming on the ground. Gohan hovered in the center of the carnage, his chest heaving. The physical toll was negligible, but the mental toll was mounting. Every time he killed one, he looked at their faces. They looked like people. Distorted, sick people. He felt a wave of nausea. Was he killing victims? But he had no choice. Armin Ahler sat in the corner of the supply room, watching the boy through the window. His tactical mind was racing, trying to categorize this new variable. This wasn't a variant of the Titans. This was a completely different power system. Flight, super strength, energy projection. If this boy was on their side, the strategic map of humanity had just changed. But Armin also saw the look on Gohan's face when he turned back to the window. It wasn't triumph. It was horror. The boy was traumatized. Armin realized that their savior was just a child, perhaps even younger than them, who was being forced to be a weapon. The cadets refueled rapidly. The presence of Gohan outside acted as an absolute deterrent. No Titan could get within 50 meters of the building without being neutralized. As they prepared to leave, a new sound cut through the air, a roar, but not the mindless moan of a pure Titan. This was a roar of rage, of sentient fury. It came from the street a few blocks away. Gohan's head snapped toward the sound. He felt a spike in energy. It wasn't Kai, but it was intense. It was hot and angry. "There's another one," Gohan whispered. "But this one feels different." Mikasa, now refueled, stepped up beside him. She asked what he saw. Gohan pointed. A 15-meter Titan with shaggy black hair and glowing green eyes was sprinting through the streets, ignoring the humans and attacking other Titans. It was fighting with martial arts techniques. It punched the head off a smaller Titan and stomped on another. Gohan watched with fascination. This monster was fighting the other monsters. "Is he with you?" Gohan asked. "No," Jean said, stepping up. "We've never seen that before." Gohan analyzed the creature. It was sloppy, uncontrolled, but it had intent. It was protecting the humans, or at least, it hated the Titans more than it hated the humans. Gohan made a choice. He would support this rogue Titan. He told the cadets to retreat to the wall. He would cover the rear. As the cadets launched themselves into the air with their ODM gear, Gohan floated alongside them, acting as a mobile shield. Whenever a Titan leaped to snatch a soldier, Gohan was there first, knocking the beast out of the air. The journey back to the wall, usually a suicide run, became a guided tour. Gohan's presence turned the desperate retreat into an organized withdrawal. But as they neared the wall, Gohan felt a massive energy signature approaching from the north. It wasn't a Titan. It was something else. He looked up. The colossal Titan. Bertolt had transformed. He had to. The warriors had panicked. They saw the tide turning. If the cadets escaped, if the demon boy secured the city, their mission was failed. Bertolt appeared over the top of the wall, his massive head peering down, steam venting from his skin. The sheer scale of him dwarfed everything Gohan had seen so far. 60 meters of muscle and bone. The wind from his transformation knocked soldiers off the wall. Gohan stopped in midair. He looked at the colossal Titan. This was the one that had kicked the wall in. This was the source of the destruction. Gohan's eyes narrowed. He felt a spike of anger. Real Saiyan anger. This wasn't a mindless beast. This thing had intelligence. It had chosen to destroy. The colossal Titan swept its arm across the top of the wall, aiming to destroy the cannons and the soldiers gathered there. It was a slow, heavy movement, but it carried the weight of a mountain. The soldiers screamed. There was no time to run. Gohan didn't scream. He snapped. He flew upward, breaking the sound barrier. He didn't aim for the arm. He aimed for the face. He stopped right in front of the colossal Titan's nose. He was a speck of dust compared to the giant. Bertolt's eyes widened. He saw the boy. He saw the golden aura flare up, turning into a raging flame. Gohan pulled his fist back. He didn't use a beam. He used a punch. He drove his fist into the bridge of the colossal titan's nose. The impact sounded like a thunderclap. The colossal titan's head snapped back. The force of the blow shattered the hardened skin of the face. The giant lost its balance. It tipped backward, away from the wall. Bertolt tried to anchor himself, to vent steam, to burn the boy, but the steam did nothing to Gohan's energy shield. The colossal titan fell. It crashed into the fields outside the wall with an earth-shaking thud that registered on seismographs in the inner district. Gohan hovered over the wall, looking down at the fallen giant. He was ready to follow up, to finish it, but then he felt his energy dip, not from exhaustion, but from hunger. He hadn't eaten since before the Cell Games. His stomach growled, a loud comical sound that cut through the tension. The adrenaline faded, and the fatigue of the day hit him. He wobbled in the air. He drifted down to the top of the wall, landing amidst the stunned garrison soldiers. Pixis was there, staring at the fallen colossal titan with his mouth slightly open. The god of destruction had just been knocked over by a slap. Gohan looked at Pixis. He looked at the bread a soldier was holding. "Excuse me," Gohan said, his voice small and polite. "Do you have any food?" Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed forward. Mikasa, who had just landed on the wall, caught him before he hit the stone. She held the unconscious boy, looking from his peaceful face to the destruction he had wrought. The timeline had not just been altered, it had been shattered. The Battle of Trost was over, but the war for the truth of this world had just begun. The boy in her arms was the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever found, and everyone, the king, the scouts, the warriors, would want to control him. But as Mikasa looked at the steam rising from the boy's body, she felt a strange instinct. She tightened her grip. She wouldn't let them have him. He wasn't a weapon. He was a child who had fallen from the sky to save them. The darkness of the dungeon was heavy and damp, smelling of mildew and old straw. Water dripped from the stone ceiling with a steady, rhythmic tapping sound that echoed in the silence. Gohan woke up slowly. His head felt thick and fuzzy, the way it always did after he used too much energy and slept for too long. For a moment, he thought he was back in the hyperbolic time chamber, waiting for his father to wake him up for training. He sat up and rubbed his eyes, expecting to see the white void. Instead, he saw iron bars. He was in a cage. The floor was cold stone against his legs. He looked down at his clothes. His purple gi was torn and stained with dark, dried blood that wasn't his. The memories rushed back to him all at once. The purple tear in the sky, the giant monsters, the city of stone, the man who exploded when Gohan kicked him, the giant red monster he had punched. Gohan gasped and scrambled backward until his back hit the cold wall of the cell. He was not home. He was trapped in a nightmare. His stomach gave a loud, angry growl that echoed through the dungeon corridor. It was a sound like a small beast roaring. Gohan clutched his belly. He was starving. The hunger was a physical pain, a sharp cramp that made him dizzy. He tried to sense for energy. He felt hundreds of small, flickering lights nearby. The humans. He felt a few stronger ones, burning with intensity. And right next to him, in the adjacent cell, he felt something strange. It was a human energy, but it was wrapped in something hot and volatile, like a fire burning under a layer of ice. Gohan crawled to the bars separating his cell from the next one. A boy was sitting there, his knees pulled up to his chest. He had dark hair and green eyes that stared at the floor with intense focus. It was the boy the soldiers had called Eren. Eren Yeager looked up. His eyes were bloodshot and wide, filled with a mixture of rage and confusion. He looked at Gohan, the small child who had fallen from the sky. Eren had vague memories of the battle. He remembered transforming, losing control, and then waking up in this cell. He remembered seeing a golden light. He asked Gohan who he was. Gohan hesitated. He didn't know how to explain. He said his name was Son Gohan. He said he was from Earth. Eren frowned. He said this was Earth. Gohan shook his head. He said it was a different Earth. He asked Eren if he had any food. Eren stared at him. The absurdity of the question in their situation made Eren let out a short, dry laugh. He said they were going to be executed, and Gohan was worried about lunch. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. Heavy boots. A metal door creaked open, letting in a shaft of harsh light. 3 men walked down into the dungeon. One was the bald commander Gohan had met on the wall, Dot Pixis. Next to him was a tall man with thick blonde eyebrows and a serious face, Erwin Smith. The third man was shorter, with sharp eyes and black hair cut in an undercut style. He moved with the quiet grace of a predator. This was Levi. They stopped in front of the cells. Levi looked at Gohan with cold, calculating eyes. He didn't look impressed. He looked like he was inspecting a faulty piece of equipment. Pixis spoke first. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. He asked Gohan how he slept. Gohan stood up and bowed politely. He said he slept well, but he was very hungry. Erwin stepped forward. He held a key. He unlocked Gohan's cell door. The soldiers behind him tensed, their rifles raised. Erwin ordered them to stand down. He opened the door and walked in. He was taking a massive risk, but Erwin Smith made a career out of gambling. He looked down at the boy. He asked Gohan what he was. Gohan looked up. He didn't lie. He said he was a Saiyan-human hybrid. He explained that he lived on a mountain with his mother and father. He explained that he could fly and shoot energy. He spoke simply, like a child explaining a school project. The adults exchanged glances. It sounded like madness, but they had seen the footage. They had seen the crater. They had seen the colossal titan fly backward. Levi walked into the cell. He moved so fast that the guards blinked and missed it. He stood right in front of Gohan. He was only slightly taller than the 11-year-old. Levi kicked Gohan. It wasn't a kill shot, but it was a test. It was a strike meant to gauge reaction time and durability. His boot aimed for Gohan's stomach. Gohan didn't dodge. He didn't block. He just tightened his abdominal muscles. The boot connected with a thud that sounded like kicking a tree trunk. Levi frowned. His foot hurt. Gohan didn't move an inch. He looked at Levi with confusion. He asked why Levi did that. Levi stepped back, hiding his surprise. He told Erwin that the brat was solid. He said he wasn't a Titan shifter. Titan shifters were soft in human form. This kid was made of something else. They brought food. It wasn't enough. They brought loaves of bread, dried meat, and soup. Gohan ate it all in seconds. He ate with a speed that terrified the guards. It was unnatural. He ate the bones of the chicken. He asked for more. Pixis laughed. He ordered the kitchen to send everything they had. While Gohan ate, they held a makeshift war council in the dungeon. The situation outside was critical. The hole in the wall was still open. Titans were still entering, though slower due to the trench Gohan had dug. But the colossal Titan had vanished. The armored Titan had not appeared. The enemy was hiding. And the military police, the king's personal guard, were demanding custody of both Eren and Gohan. They wanted to dissect them and then burn the remains. Erwin laid out the reality. They had 2 choices. Hand Gohan and Eren over to the MPs, which meant death and the eventual fall of Wall Rose, or use them to retake Trost. Erwin wanted to use Eren's Titan form to carry a giant boulder to seal the gate. He wanted Gohan to provide air support. Gohan stopped eating. He wiped his mouth. He looked at Irvin. He asked why they needed a boulder. He said he could just fill the hole with rocks, or he could melt the wall together. Irvin paused. The concept of melting the wall was foreign to him. He asked Gohan to explain. Gohan said he could use his energy to heat the stone until it turned to liquid, then let it cool. It would seal the hole perfectly. The room went silent. If that was true, the strategic balance of humanity had shifted permanently. But there was a problem. Trust. The soldiers were terrified of Gohan. If he walked out there and started firing beams of light, the garrison might panic and shoot him. They needed a demonstration. They needed to show that Gohan was under control. Gohan looked at Eren. He sensed the turmoil in the older boy. He told Eren that it wasn't his fault. He said that power depends on the heart of the user. If Eren wanted to save people, his monster form would save people. Eren looked at Gohan. For the first time, the rage in his eyes cooled slightly. He saw a kindred spirit, a monster who wanted to be a hero. They moved to the surface. The sun was high in the sky. The Trost District was a smoking ruin. The smell of death was everywhere. Corpses lined the streets. Gohan saw them and flinched. He had seen death before, but the sheer volume of it here was overwhelming. These people didn't have Dragon Balls. When they died, they stayed dead. The finality of it weighed on his soul. He promised himself he wouldn't let anyone else die today. He walked out onto the street, surrounded by the elite squad of the scouts. Hungy Zoe was walking backwards in front of him, asking a million questions about his physiology. Did he have a tail? Gohan said he used to, but it was removed. Hunger wrote that down furiously. The operation was simple. Gohan would fly to the gate. He would use a low-power energy wave to collapse the archway and fuse the stone. The scouts would protect him from Titans. Eren would stay in reserve in case Gohan failed. They reached the edge of the industrial sector. The gate was visible in the distance. The trench Gohan had dug was filled with Titans trying to climb out. It was a pit of writhing limbs. Gohan floated up. The soldiers gasped. Even seeing it a second time, it was impossible. He was defying the laws of nature. Suddenly, a yellow spark of lightning struck the ground near the wall. A shockwave blew the nearest soldiers off their feet. Steam hissed and boiled. From the cloud emerged the armored Titan. Reiner had been hiding, waiting. He couldn't let them seal the gate. If they sealed the gate, the mission was a failure. He had to kill the builder. He had to kill the boy. The armored Titan roared and charged. He didn't run like a mindless beast. He ran like a linebacker. He lowered his shoulder, aiming for the support pillar of the wall. He wanted to bring the whole section down on top of Gohan. Gohan saw him coming. He sensed the intelligence. This was the same as the red one. A human in a suit. Gohan dropped from the sky. He landed in front of the armored Titan. He was 4 feet tall. The Titan was 15 meters. Reiner saw the boy and didn't hesitate. He punched. His fist was covered in hardened bone plating. It could smash through a wall. It hit Gohan. The ground exploded. Dust rose in a massive mushroom cloud. The soldier screamed. Mikasa, watching from a roof, stepped forward, her hand reaching out. But as the dust cleared, the armored Titan was standing still. His fist was stopped. Gohan was holding it. He was holding the giant fist with one hand. His feet had dug 2 deep trenches in the cobblestones, dragging back 10 meters. But he was standing. Gohan looked at the Titan. He looked angry. He said that was dangerous. He said there were people nearby. Reiner panicked. He couldn't pull his hand back. The boy's grip was like steel. Reiner swung his other fist. Gohan caught that one too, Now they were locked. The armored titan pushed with all his might, his boots grinding the stone to dust. Gohan pushed back. Slowly, terrifyingly, the armored titan began to lift off the ground. Gohan was lifting a 15-meter giant by its hands. He swung the titan in a circle and threw him. Reiner flew through the air and crashed into a row of houses. But this was the trap. As Reiner crashed, he intentionally rolled, smashing through the support columns of a large stone building. The evacuation center. The building groaned. It was filled with wounded soldiers and civilians who hadn't made it out. The roof began to sag. Gohan heard the screams. He realized what the enemy had done. He looked at Reiner, who was getting up, preparing to charge again. Gohan had a choice: fight the enemy or save the people. He didn't hesitate. He turned his back on the armored titan. He flew under the collapsing roof of the evacuation center. He raised his hands. He caught the falling ceiling. Tons of stone and timber slammed into his palms. The weight was immense. The building was 4 stories of solid rock. Gohan gritted his teeth. His boots cracked the floor. He held the building up. He shouted for everyone to get out. Reiner saw his chance. He knew the boy wouldn't let go. The boy was soft. He cared about lives. Reiner charged. He wasn't going to punch the boy. He was going to tackle the building. If he hit the building while Gohan was holding it, the structural integrity would fail completely. The boy would be buried, and the people would be crushed. It was a ruthless soldier's calculation. Mikasa and the scouts saw it happening. They launched their hooks. They tried to intercept the armored titan, but their blades shattered against his armor. He was unstoppable. He was a tank. He plowed through the soldiers, ignoring them. He was 10 seconds away from impact. Gohan felt the vibration of the approaching steps. He couldn't let go. If he let go, 500 people died. He shouted for someone to stop the titan, but nobody could. Then a roar shook the district. Not a titan roar, a human roar. Eren Yeager jumped from the roof. He bit his hand. Lightning struck. The rogue titan appeared. But Eren didn't have control. He was a berserker. He didn't attack Reiner. He attacked the nearest moving thing, which was a group of soldiers. The chaos was absolute. The saviors were fighting each other or trapped. Reiner slammed into the evacuation center. The impact was deafening. The walls blew out. Gohan screamed as the weight shifted unevenly. He flared his aura, trying to create a shield, but the physics were against him. He could hold the weight, but he couldn't hold the individual stones together. The building crumbled. Gohan was buried under a mountain of rubble. The dust swallowed the street. Reiner backed away, steaming, satisfied. He had neutralized the threat, but the dust began to glow. A pillar of golden light erupted from the ruins. The stones were vaporized. Gohan rose from the debris. He was covered in dust. His clothes were shredded. He was bleeding from a cut on his head, but he wasn't holding the building anymore. He had failed. He looked around. The civilians near the impact zone were dead, crushed. He saw a hand sticking out of the rubble. A small hand, a child's hand. Something snapped inside Gohan. Not the rage that defeated Cell. This was something colder. It was the realization that being strong wasn't enough. He had played by the rules. He had tried to save everyone. And because he hesitated to kill the enemy immediately, people died. He looked at the armored titan. Reiner took a step back. He felt a fear he had never known. The boy wasn't looking at him like a fighter looks at an opponent. He was looking at him like a plague that needed to be cured. Gohan vanished. He appeared on Reiner's shoulder. He didn't punch. He placed his hand on the armored titan's neck, right over the nape. He didn't know about the nape weakness, but he knew about necks. He squeezed. The armor plate on Reiner's neck cracked. Reiner screamed. It was a sound of pure terror. Gohan ripped the armor off. He exposed the red muscle underneath. He raised his other hand. A disk of yellow energy formed. It buzzed like a saw. "Stop!" The voice cut through the red haze. It was Erwin Smith. He was standing on a roof nearby. He shouted at Gohan. He said they needed him alive. They needed information. Gohan paused. The energy disk hovered inches from Reiner's neck. Reiner was frozen, paralyzed by the proximity of death. Gohan looked at Erwin. He looked at the dead civilians. He looked at the terrified soldiers. He realized what he looked like. He looked like a monster. He powered down the energy disk. He kicked Reiner in the back of the head. The armored titan face planted into the street and went limp. Reiner was unconscious inside. Gohan floated down. He didn't speak. He walked over to the ruins of the evacuation center. He started lifting stones, looking for survivors. The soldiers watched him. They didn't cheer. They were too afraid. They had just seen a child defeat the invincible armored titan in seconds, but they had also seen the cost of the battle. The sun began to set. The Trost District was secured. The hole was eventually sealed by Gohan melting the rock, just as he said he would. But the victory felt like a funeral. The military police arrived in force to take custody of Eren and Gohan. This time, the scouts didn't argue as fiercely. The fear was palpable. Gohan allowed them to put handcuffs on him. They were regular steel cuffs. He could break them by sneezing. But he wore them. He wanted to show he wasn't an enemy. He was led to a wagon. Eren was already inside, bound and gagged. Eren looked at Gohan. Eren's eyes were full of questions. Why didn't you kill him? Why did you stop? Gohan didn't answer. He looked out the back of the wagon as they rolled away. He saw the smoke rising from the city. He saw the eyes of the people. They weren't looking at a savior. They were looking at a weapon of mass destruction that had just walked into their house. As the wagon rattled toward the interior, toward the capital, Gohan closed his eyes. He tried to meditate. He tried to find his center. But all he could hear was the crunch of the building collapsing. All he could feel was the failure. He was the strongest being in this world, and yet he felt smaller than he ever had. The complexity of this war was suffocating. Enemies who looked like allies, allies who wanted to kill him, and the constant gnawing hunger that reminded him he was alone in a universe that didn't have beings that could heal wounds. In the shadows of an alleyway, a blonde girl watched the wagon leave. Annie Leonhardt had not joined the attack. She had observed. She saw what happened to Reiner. She saw the speed. She saw the hesitation. She adjusted her hood. She knew now. The boy was invincible in a fight, but he was weak in his heart. He could be broken, not by force, but by leverage. She turned and walked away into the dark streets. The warriors had lost the battle, but they had learned how to win the war. The wagon passed through the inner gate. Gohan felt the atmosphere change. The air was cleaner here, but the energy was darker. Greed, fear, deceit. He was entering the snake pit of the royal government. He tightened his fists in the handcuffs. The metal groaned. He loosened his grip. He had to be patient. He had to find a way to get back to his own time, but until then, he had to survive the politics of a world that wanted him dead. And he had to figure out why the energy of the king, in the center of the walls, felt so strangely empty. The catastrophe was not the fall of the wall. It was the fall of the illusion that power equals safety. Gohan had saved the wall, but he had shattered the social order. The people now knew that Titans were not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing was a child who could catch a falling building and then fail to hold it. The trust was gone. The era of fear had truly begun. The trial took place in a courtroom that felt more like a tomb. It was underground, lit by flickering torches that cast long, dancing shadows against the cold stone walls. The air was stale, recycled by a ventilation system that hadn't been cleaned in decades. Gohan stood on a raised platform in the center of the room, flanked by 4 military police soldiers who held their rifles with white-knuckle grips. They were terrified of him. Gohan could hear their heartbeats hammering against their ribs. To his left, Eren was chained to a pole, kneeling on the hard floor. Eren looked feral, his eyes darting around the room, assessing threats. Gohan just looked tired. He wore a fresh shirt they had given him, white and stiff, which felt wrong compared to his GI. His hands were cuffed behind his back with thick iron shackles. Darius Zackley, the premier, sat on a high bench overlooking them. He was an old man with glasses and a beard that hid his expression. To the right sat the military police, led by Nile Dock. To the left sat the scouts, led by Erwin Smith. The tension in the room was of physical pressure. This wasn't a trial of justice. It was a negotiation over who got to wield the nuclear weapons. Nile Docker stood up first. He was sweating. He argued that Gohan and Eren were threats to the stability of the walls. He claimed Gohan was a foreign agent, a sorcerer, or a new type of Titan. He demanded immediate execution. He said they should be dissected to learn their secrets and then incinerated. Erwin Smith stood up. He was calm, his voice steady. He argued that Gohan was the only reason Trost still stood. He pointed out that Gohan had sealed the gate and captured the armored Titan, though Reiner had escaped in the confusion. A detail that still bothered Gohan. Erwin proposed that the scouts take custody of both boys. He said they would use Gohan's power to retake Wall Maria. He looked at Gohan. He didn't promise safety. He promised purpose. Then a merchant stood up. He was red-faced and angry. He shouted that Gohan had destroyed his warehouse. He said the boy was a menace who couldn't control his power. The courtroom erupted into shouting. People were calling Gohan a monster. They were calling for his death, Eren snapped. He started screaming at them, calling them cowards. He said they were just afraid of what they didn't understand. Nile Dokke panicked. He ordered a soldier to shoot Eren. The soldier raised his rifle. Gohan didn't move his feet. He just looked at the rifle. The barrel of the gun suddenly bent upward at a 90-degree angle. The soldier stared at his weapon in shock. Gohan had used a tiny pulse of telekinesis. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted them to stop. The room went silent. Levi stepped forward. He walked up to Eren and kicked him in the face. It was brutal. Teeth flew. Levi beat Eren until the boy was a bloody mess. Then Levi turned to Gohan. He walked up to him. He didn't kick Gohan. He knew better now. He looked Gohan in the eye. "Can you control it?" Levi asked. Gohan looked at the small, dangerous man. "Yes. If you lose control, can I kill you?" Gohan paused. He thought about his father. He thought about Cell. He thought about the rage that sometimes took over. "I don't know," Gohan said honestly. "But you can try." It was the perfect answer. It wasn't arrogant. It was factual. Zackley laughed. He gave custody to the scouts, but with a condition. If Gohan or Eren showed any sign of betrayal or loss of control, they were to be terminated immediately. The scouts were not just their guardians, they were their executioners. They were moved to the old scout headquarters, a converted castle deep in the forest. It was isolated, far from the cities. The world knew about Gohan now. The spies knew. The warriors knew. And Gohan, was about to learn that the biggest threat wasn't the titans outside the walls, but the questions inside his own head. Training began the next day, but it wasn't the kind of training Gohan was used to. Hunger Zoe didn't want him to do push-ups. She wanted to test his limits. She had him lift boulders. She had him fly at top speed. She measured his energy output. Gohan complied, but he held back. He always held back. He was afraid that if he really let go, he would break the world. Hunger noticed this. She sat him down one evening by the fire. She asked him why he was afraid. Gohan looked to the flames. He told her about the Cell games. He told her how his anger had gotten his father killed. He said he didn't want to be a warrior. He wanted to be a scholar. Hunger looked at him with sadness. She told him that in this world, scholars died if they couldn't fight. She showed him her research on Titans. She showed him the gruesome reality of how they ate people. She said that knowledge required power to protect it. It was a lesson Gohan was slowly, painfully learning. Meanwhile, the relationship between Gohan and the other cadets was strained. Jean, Connie, and Sasha were terrified of him. They had seen him catch a building. They sat at a different table during meals. Only Armin would talk to him. Armin was fascinated by Gohan's world. He asked about the stars, about space, about technology. Gohan told him about capsules, about airplanes, about the Dragon radar. Armin's eyes lit up. He sketched everything Gohan described. For a brief moment, they were just two kids dreaming of a bigger world. But the peace didn't last. The 57th Exterior Scouting Mission was announced. The goal was to go to Shiganshina, but Irvin had a secret plan. He wanted to draw out the spy. He suspected there was a traitor in the ranks, someone who had helped the armored Titan escape. Gohan was placed in Levi's squad, along with Eren. They were the bait. The mission began at dawn. The scouts rode out on horses. Gohan didn't ride a horse. He floated a few inches above the saddle to blend in, pretending to ride so he wouldn't stand out from a distance. The formation was a wide spread, designed to spot Titans early. But as they entered the forest of giant trees, the formation collapsed. The right flank was decimated. A new Titan had appeared, the female Titan. She moved like a human. She had martial arts skills. She was killing scouts with efficiency, spinning them around by their wires like toys. She was heading straight for the center column, straight for Eren and Gohan. A messenger rode up to Levi's squad, screaming that the right flank was gone. Levi ordered them to keep moving. Eren wanted to fight. He saw the black smoke. He knew people were dying. He begged Levi to let him transform. Levi said no. He told Eren to trust the squad. Gohan stayed silent. He sensed the energy of the female Titan. It was familiar. It felt like Annie, the girl who was always quiet, the girl who fought with the same cold precision. The female Titan burst into the clearing. She was 14 meters tall, skinless in places with blonde hair. She ran with terrifying speed. The support squad behind them engaged her. They were elites. They died in seconds. She crushed them against trees. She stomped them into the mud. Eren screamed. He put his hand to his mouth to bite it. Levi looked at Gohan. "Wait," Levi said. Gohan looked at the slaughter behind them. He couldn't wait. He didn't care about the plan. He didn't care about the trap. He launched himself off the horse. He flew backward, toward the female Titan. Levi shouted a curse, but he didn't stop him. Gohan collided with the female Titan in mid-stride. He didn't hit her hard enough to kill. He just stopped her. He placed his hand on her chest and pushed. The female Titan skidded backward, her heels digging deep furrows in the earth. She looked down at the boy floating in front of her. Her eyes widened. She recognized him. "Annie," Gohan said softly. He wasn't asking. He knew. Stop this. The female titan didn't respond with words. She responded with a kick. Her leg snapped up, aiming for Gohan's head. It was a Muay Thai roundhouse, perfect form. Gohan blocked it with his forearm. The impact created a shockwave that stripped the bark off the nearby trees. Gohan didn't budge. He looked sad. You can't win, Gohan said. You're strong, but you're not like me. Annie knew this. She had seen him in Trost. She knew she couldn't beat him in a straight fight. So she cheated. She hardened her fist into a diamond-like crystal. She didn't punch Gohan. She punched the ground. The earth erupted. Massive roots and dirt flew into the air, creating a smokescreen. In the confusion, she screamed. It wasn't a roar of anger. It was a summon. From all around the forest, titans began to sprint toward them. Mindless titans. Hundreds of them. They ignored the humans. They ignored Gohan. They ran straight for the female titan. They began to eat her. Gohan was confused. Why was she letting them eat her? Then he realized. She was destroying the evidence. She was escaping. He blasted the titans away with waves of ki, vaporizing them in groups. But there were too many. The steam was blinding. By the time he cleared the area, the female titan's body was a skeleton. A figure in a scout cloak was grappling away through the trees. Gohan flew after the figure. He was faster. He caught up in seconds. He reached out to grab the hooded cloak. But as his hand closed on the fabric, a trap sprung. Explosives rigged to the trees detonated. It was a massive charge, enough to bring down a skyscraper. Gohan was engulfed in fire. He wasn't hurt. The fire couldn't touch him. But the force of the blast knocked him off course. He tumbled through the air. By the time he righted himself, the figure was gone, mixed in with other squads. The trail was cold. Gohan returned to Levi's squad. He had failed again. He had the power of a god, but he was being outmaneuvered by tactical genius. He felt stupid. He felt like a blunt instrument. Levi looked at him. He didn't scold him. He just nodded. She's smart, Levi said. She knows you hold back. That's your weakness, brat. The mission was a disaster. They returned to the walls in defeat. The people jeered them. They threw rocks. Gohan walked behind the wagons. A rock hit him in the head. It didn't hurt, but it stung his heart. He was trying so hard. Why did they hate him? Back in the capital, the situation spiraled. The government demanded Eren and Gohan be handed over. Irvin played his last card. He deduced Annie's identity. He planned to trap her in the Trost District. It was a desperate gamble. They would lure her into an underground tunnel where she couldn't transform. The day of the operation, Gohan walked with Eren, Mikasa, and Armin through the streets of Trost. They met Annie. Armin tried to convince her to help them escape. It was a lie. Annie saw through it. She laughed, a cold, bleak laugh. She reached for a ring on her finger, a hidden blade. Annie, don't, Gohan said. He stepped forward. We don't have to fight. Annie looked at Gohan. For a second, her mask slipped. She looked like a tired, scared girl. I just want to go home, she whispered. Then she spiked the ring into her finger. Yellow lightning exploded. The transformation blew the street apart. Civilians were crushed. Gohan shielded Armin and Mikasa. Taking the debris on his back, the female titan rose from the dust. She didn't fight Gohan. She ran. She tried to climb the wall. She knew Gohan was the only threat. If she could get over the wall, she could escape. Eren transformed. The rogue titan roared and chased her. They fought in the streets. It was brutal. Buildings collapsed. People died. Gohan hovered above the chaos, paralyzed by the scale of it. If he fired a blast big enough to stop her, he would kill thousands. If he did nothing, she escaped. He saw the church full of worshippers. The female titan was knocked into it, crushing everyone inside. Gohan screamed. His aura flared. The ground shook. He flew down and grabbed the female titan by the hair. He threw her back into the street. "Stop killing people," he yelled. Annie hardened her skin. She fought back with desperation. She kicked Eren's head off. She punched Gohan. Her crystal fist shattered against Gohan's face. Gohan didn't blink. He punched her in the stomach. The armor shattered. The female titan doubled over. Gohan raised his hand to finish it, but he saw her crying. The titan was crying. He hesitated. In that split second, Annie began to encase herself in crystal. A hard, indestructible diamond shell formed around her human body. She was sealing herself away. Gohan tried to break it, but it was already too hard. She was gone, trapped in a coma of her own making. The aftermath was silence. The city was ruined. The scouts had won, but they had no answers. Annie was a rock. Gohan stood in the wreckage, looking at his hands. He had let it happen again. His hesitation, his need to save the enemy. But the true horror was just beginning. As the sun set, a piece of the wall fell off where the female titan had tried to climb. Mikasa saw it first. Behind the stone masonry, inside the wall itself, was a face. A titan's face. A colossal titan. The walls were made of titans. The revelation broke something in the soldiers' minds. They had been protected by the very monsters they feared. Hang rushed to the wall. She demanded answers from Pastor Nick, a priest of the wall cult. He refused to speak. He said the wall was sacred. Gohan flew up to the face in the wall. He touched the cold skin. He sensed the energy. It was dormant, asleep, but it was alive. Millions of them. Sleeping giants standing shoulder to shoulder. If they woke up, they could flatten the world, Gohan whispered. The escalation was complete. The enemy wasn't just outside. The enemy was the foundation of their civilization. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, the beast titan was moving. Zeke Yeager sat on top of Wall Rose, looking at the moon. He adjusted his glasses. He had heard the reports. A flying boy, a boy who glowed gold. Zeke scratched his beard. A Saiyan, he muttered to himself. He knew the legends. He had access to memories that went back further than the history books. This complicates things. But monkeys are cleverer than dragons. Zeke stood up. He had turned the villagers of Ragako into titans. He was testing the defenses. He wanted to see the boy for himself. He wanted to see if the Saiyan could be broken, or if he could be recruited. After all, they were both monsters in a world of humans. Gohan sitting on the roof of the headquarters, looking at the stars. He felt a new energy approaching. It was dark. It was cold. It felt like space. It wasn't Frieza. It wasn't Cell. It was something ancient. He clenched his fist. The scholarly boy was gone. The warrior was waking up. He realized now that in this world, kindness was a luxury he couldn't afford. Next time, he wouldn't hesitate. Next time, he would shoot to kill. But as he made that vow, he didn't notice the crack in his own psyche. The stress was accumulating. The hunger was constant. The isolation was growing. Gohan was strong, but he was 11, and he was breaking. The foreshadowing of a moral fracture was laid bare. He was beginning to view the humans not as people to be saved, but as liabilities to be managed. A dangerous thought for a god among insects. The night air inside Wall Rose was thick with the smell of pine and panic. There was no moon, only the distant, flickering light of torches moving through the forest like fireflies caught in a spiderweb. Gohan flew above the tree line, his energy signature suppressed to a whisper. He was exhausted, not the physical exhaustion of muscle failure, but a deep spiritual fatigue that made his bones ache. He had been awake for 3 days straight, darting from sector to sector, responding to flares that signaled titans where there should be no titans. The news had shattered the fragile peace of the morning. Wall Rose had been breached, but there was no hole. The scouts couldn't find a breach. The titans had simply appeared, manifesting in the villages, tearing families apart in their homes. Gohan had seen the carnage in Ragako village. He had seen the house that had burst from the inside out. He had seen the titan lying on its back, its limbs too weak to move, staring at him with eyes that looked painfully, terrifyingly human. It reminded him of the androids, of artificial life. But this was worse. This was organic corruption. He banked left, heading toward the ruins of Utgard Castle. He could sense faint life signals there, flickering and weak. They were surrounded. Below him, the darkness was alive with the heavy, thudding footsteps of giants. They were moving at night. That was impossible. Hunger had said titans needed sunlight. Yet here they were, active under the starlight, driven by a will that superseded biology. Gohan felt a spike of power to the north. It wasn't the hot, burning energy of the armored titan or the simmering steam of the colossal. It was cold. It was calculating. It felt like a scientist looking at a petri dish. Gohan landed on the crumbling tower of Utgard, just as a boulder the size of a carriage slammed into the masonry 10 feet below him. The impact shook the entire structure, sending dust and stone shards raining down on the soldiers clinging to the roof. Connie, Krista, Ymir, Bertolt, and Reiner were there, armed only with small knives, their ODM gear useless without gas or blades. The veterans, Nanaba, Gelgar, and the others, were dead or dying below, torn apart by the horde. Gohan looked down. There were dozens of titans swarming the base of the tower, but his eyes were drawn to the darkness beyond the torchlight. Standing near the tree line, barely visible, was a titan unlike any other. It was covered in dark fur, with long arms that dragged on the ground, and a face that was disturbingly simian. The beast titan. It held another boulder in its hand. It wasn't mindlessly attacking. It was pitching. It was aiming. Gohan locked eyes with the creature. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent in Gohan's mind. The beast titan paused. It grinned. It didn't roar. It adjusted its grip on the stone. Gohan didn't wait. He flared his aura, illuminating the night like a second sun. The titans at the base of the tower recoiled from the sudden light. Gohan pointed his hand at the beast titan. He wasn't going to play games. He fired a Masenko. The beam of yellow energy tore through the air, scorching the grass. But the beast titan was fast, faster than a creature that size had any right to be. It leapt sideways, moving with the agility of a spider monkey, and the beam sheared through the forest, vaporizing a swath of trees but missing the target. The beast titan rolled to its feet and threw the boulder, not at Gohan, at the tower. It was a tactical choice. The monster knew Gohan would choose to save the humans. Gohan cursed and vanished, reappearing in the path of the boulder. He shattered it with a punch, turning the deadly projectile into harmless gravel. But in that split second of distraction, the beast titan roared. It was a command. The titans at the base of the tower went into a frenzy, climbing over each other, ignoring self-preservation to reach the humans on the roof. Gohan looked back at the beast titan, but it was retreating, fading into the dark woods. He wanted to chase it. Every instinct in his Saiyan blood screamed at him to hunt down the leader. If he killed that thing, the coordination would stop. But if he left now, Connie and the others would be eaten in less than a minute. It was a choice between winning the war and saving his friends. Gohan chose his friends. He dove toward the tower. The next 5 minutes were a blur of violence. Gohan didn't use beams. The structural integrity of the castle was too compromised. He used his body. He flew through the necks of the Titans like a bullet. He kicked heads off shoulders. He grabbed Titans by their ankles and used them as clubs to beat other Titans back. It was a massacre. Ymir, who had been about to reveal her secret, stopped her hand halfway to her mouth. She watched the boy in the purple GE dismantle an army of nightmares. She saw the look on his face. It wasn't heroic. It was annoyed. He was killing them like candy, but he was swatting flies, efficient and completely detached. When the last Titan fell, steaming in the cool night air, the relief on the roof was palpable. But it was short-lived. The main scout force arrived moments later, led by Hunger and Eren. They saw the piles of dead Titans. They saw Gohan sitting on the edge of the parapet, staring into the woods. He looked hauntingly small. Eren landed next to him. He asked Gohan what happened. Gohan pointed to the woods. He said there was a monkey that threw rocks and gave orders. Hunger's eyes went wide. An intelligent Titan. Another shifter. They evacuated the survivors to the top of Wall Rose. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. The soldiers were exhausted, running on adrenaline and fear. They had no horses, no supplies, and the lifts were broken. They were trapped on top of the wall until reinforcements could arrive. Gohan sat apart from the group, his legs dangling over the edge, looking down at the ground 50 meters below. His stomach growled loud enough for Reiner to hear. Reiner Brown walked over to Gohan. He held a ration bar. He offered it to the boy. Gohan looked at the food, then at Reiner. He sensed the turmoil in Reiner's spirit. It was a chaotic storm of guilt, duty, and a fractured identity. Gohan took the bar. He said thank you. Reiner sat down next to him. He looked at the sunrise. He started talking about going home. He said he was tired of this. He said he just wanted it to end. Gohan nodded. He understood that feeling. He wanted to go home too. He wanted his mum's cooking. He wanted to study without worrying about being eaten. Reiner stood up and walked toward Eren. Gohan watched him go. He chewed the dry ration bar slowly. He heard Reiner talking to Eren. The wind carried the words. Reiner said something strange. He said, "I am the armored Titan, and he is the colossal Titan." He pointed at Bertolt. Gohan stopped chewing. He thought it was a joke, a bad coping mechanism. Soldiers went crazy all the time. But then he felt the spike in energy. It was the same energy he had felt in Trost, the hot, burning intent. Gohan stood up. He swallowed the food. He walked toward them. Eren was laughing, trying to brush it off. But Gohan saw Reiner's face. Reiner wasn't joking. He was removing a bandage from his arm. Steam was rising from the wound. The air pressure dropped. The birds stopped singing. "Reiner," Gohan said, his voice soft. "Don't do this." Reiner looked at Gohan. There was a profound sadness in his eyes. "You're the variable, Gohan. The one thing we didn't account for. You're too strong. If we don't take Eren now, you'll kill us all eventually. I can't let my mission fail." Mikasa moved. She was faster than sound when her family was threatened. Her blades flashed, slicing into Reiner's arm and Bertolt's neck. But she hesitated to decapitate them. They were her comrades. That millisecond of hesitation was fatal. Reiner tackled Eren. Bertolt transformed. The explosion was instantaneous, but Gohan moved faster than the explosion. As the yellow lightning struck, Gohan grabbed Mikasa and Armin and threw them backward, away from the blast zone. He turned back to the source. The colossal Titan appeared, but only half of him. His torso hung over the wall, his ribs anchoring him to the stone. The force of the transformation blew the top of the wall apart. Gohan was caught in the shockwave. He flared his aura to shield himself, but the heat was intense. It was like standing inside a volcano. Steam blasted him, blinding him white. Through the steam, he heard Eren scream. It was the scream of the attack titan. Reiner had transformed into the armored titan and was plummeting down the side of the wall, clutching Eren in his hand. They were falling toward the ground. Gohan dove through the steam. He ignored the heat that singed his eyebrows. He flew straight down. He saw Reiner sliding down the wall, his fingers digging into the stone to slow his descent. Eren was struggling in his grip, biting his own hand, transforming mid-air. The two titans crashed into the ground below in a tangle of limbs and dust. Gohan hovered above them. He raised his hand. He could end this. He could fire a blast that would obliterate Reiner's head. But Reiner was holding Eren against his chest. If Gohan missed by an inch, or if Reiner moved, Eren would be vaporized. The hostage tactic. It was simple, and against a being of immense power, it was the only defense. Eren roared and punched Reiner in the face. The armored titan's plating cracked, but he didn't let go. He locked Eren in a submission hold, an armbar that threatened to snap the attack titan's joints. Reiner began to run. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to escape. He ran toward the open fields, toward the Titan territory. Gohan dropped to the ground, blocking Reiner's path. He stood there, 4 feet tall against 15 meters of armored muscle. Reiner didn't stop. He charged. He was betting that Gohan wouldn't fire. He was right. Gohan didn't fire. He jumped. He delivered an uppercut to Reiner's jaw. The impact lifted the armored titan off its feet and flipped it onto its back. The ground shook as if an earthquake had hit. Eren was thrown loose from the grip. "Get Eren out of here," Gohan shouted to the scouts who were descending the wall on wires. But from the top of the wall, the colossal titan made his move. Bertolt didn't climb down. He leaned forward. He opened his mouth. He wasn't breathing fire. He was tilting. He broke his own ribs, detached from the wall, and fell. A 60-meter skeleton of fire and bone falling from the sky. He wasn't aiming for the ground. He was aiming for Gohan and Eren. Gohan looked up. The sky was blocked out by the falling giant. He realized the strategy. It was a suicide bomb. Gohan had a split second. He could fly away and save himself. He could grab Eren and try to outrun the impact radius. But the scouts, Mikasa, Armin, Hunger, were grappling down the wall right above the impact zone. If the colossal titan hit the ground, the shockwave would turn their internal organs to jelly. Gohan made the choice. He didn't run. He flew up. He flew straight into the falling body of the colossal titan. He aimed for the chest. He was going to catch him. He slammed into the sternum of the colossal titan. The weight was unimaginable. Thousands of tons of momentum. Gohan's vision blurred. His arms screamed as he tried to decelerate the fall. He pushed with everything he had, his aura flaring into a blinding beacon. He slowed the titan down. He stopped the catastrophic impact. But he couldn't stop the heat. Bertolt released all his steam at once. It was a concentrated blast of superheated gas, hotter than the surface of Venus. It enveloped Gohan completely. Gohan couldn't breathe. The oxygen was burned away. His skin blistered. His energy barrier flickered. He was suffocating. He lost his focus. The colossal titan shifted its weight, sliding off Gohan's hands and crashed into the ground with a reduced but still massive impact. The dust cloud was impenetrable. Gohan fell to the ground, coughing, his lungs burning. He had saved the scouts from the shockwave, but he had lost his orientation. He couldn't sense energy through the chaotic interference of the steam and the pain. He heard heavy footsteps fading away. When the wind finally cleared the smoke, the field was empty. Reiner and Bertold were gone, and Eren was gone. They had taken him. Gohan stood in the crater, his clothes burned to rags, his body covered in soot. Hunger landed next to him, stumbling, one eye swollen shut from the earlier battle. Mikasa landed, looking frantically around the empty field. When she realized Eren was gone, she let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, but a broken gasp of despair. She collapsed to her knees. Gohan stared at the horizon. He had failed. He had the power to destroy the planet, but he couldn't save one friend. He had hesitated on the wall. He had tried to talk to Reiner. He had tried to understand the enemy, and because of that, Eren was gone. Armin limped over. He looked at Gohan. He didn't blame him. He saw the burns on Gohan's arms. "We have to go after them," Armin whispered. "They can't have gone far. They're exhausted." Gohan turned to look at Armin. His teal eyes were dull. The light in them had changed. It wasn't the warm, curious light of the boy who wanted to be a scholar. It was cold, hard. "I won't make that mistake again," Gohan said. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't wait for horses. He levitated off the ground, but his body betrayed him. He wobbled. The hunger hit him like a sledgehammer. He had burned too many calories holding up the colossal titan. His vision grayed at the edges. He fell back to the ground, catching himself on his hands and knees. He dry heaved. He was completely tapped out. Hunger rushed to him. "You need to eat," she said, her voice clinical but urgent. "Your metabolism is accelerating. You're digesting your own muscle mass." Gohan looked at his hands. They were trembling. He was useless, the strongest being alive, and he was defeated by biology. He pounded his fist into the dirt, cracking the earth. Tears of frustration welled up in his eyes. "I need food," Gohan growled. "Give me everything you have." The pursuit would have to wait. The scouts scrambled to gather rations from the wreckage of the supply wagons. They fed the alien boy while the trail of the kidnappers went cold. Every bite Gohan took tasted like ash. He was eating to fuel a weapon, not a child. 5 hours later, the sun was high. The scouts were mounted. Erwin Smith had arrived with reinforcements, and the lifts were fixed. They were going into Titan territory, a suicide mission to retrieve Eren. Gohan flew above the formation, conserving energy by riding the updrafts. He looked different. He had found a discarded scout cloak and wrapped it around himself. It was too big, flapping in the wind like a dark wing. He wasn't smiling. They found them in the forest of giant trees. Reiner, Bertold, Ymir, and Eren. They were resting on high branches. The confrontation was inevitable. But this time, the dynamic had shifted. Reiner watched the approaching formation. He saw the green smoke flares. He saw the dark speck floating above the horses. "He's here," Reiner said, fear creeping into his voice. "The monster is back." Bertold looked nervous. He barely survived the fall. He should be dead. "He's not human," Ymir said, looking at Gohan. "You can't kill him with tricks. You have to bargain with him." But Gohan wasn't in a bargaining mood. He didn't fly down to talk. He hovered above the trees. He raised his hand. He pointed his finger at the branch Reiner was sitting on. He fired a ki blast. It wasn't a warning shot. It was a sniper shot. The branch exploded. Reiner and Eren fell. Reiner transformed in midair, catching Eren. The armored titan hit the forest floor and started running. He wasn't fighting. He was fleeing. He knew he couldn't win against Gohan now. Gohan descended. He was about to engage when a swarm of titans burst from the undergrowth. Erwin had led a horde of pure titans into the forest to create chaos. It was madness. Soldiers were dying left and right. Titans were eating titans. In the confusion, Erwin was bitten. A titan clamped his jaws on his right arm. "Advance!" Erwin screamed, even as he was dragged off his horse. "Eren is just ahead. Advance!" Gohan heard the scream. He saw the commander losing his arm. He saw the absolute resolve of these humans. They were willing to be eaten just to gain a few yards. It shamed him. He had been holding back to preserve his humanity, while they sacrificed theirs to preserve the future. Gohan flew to Erwin. He sliced the Titan's head in half with his hand, freeing the commander. He grabbed Erwin by the back of his uniform. "You're hurt," Gohan said. "Put me down," Erwin roared, blood spraying from his stump. "The mission is Eren. Don't waste your power on me." Gohan looked at the man. He saw the madness. He respected it. He dropped Erwin back onto a passing horse, which happened to be Armin's, and turned toward the armored Titan. Reiner was cornered. The pure Titans were swarming him. He was protecting Eren, but he was overwhelmed. Gohan landed on the armored Titan's head. Reiner froze. He felt the weight. "Give him back," Gohan said. Reiner roared and tried to swat Gohan. Gohan caught the hand and snapped the wrist. It was a wet, loud crunch. Reiner screamed. Gohan reached into the armor, tearing the hardened skin away from the neck. He was going to pull Reiner out. But then, the coordinate activated. Eren, desperate and touching the smiling Titan that had eaten his mother, punched its hand. A shockwave of invisible energy rippled through the forest. Gohan felt it. It wasn't Kai. It was a command. A neural override. Every pure Titan in the area stopped. They turned. They looked at Reiner. And they looked at Gohan. "Kill them," the command echoed in the primitive brains of the monsters. 50 Titans lunged at Reiner, but 10 of them lunged at Gohan. They were mindless, overriding their fear of the predator with the absolute order of the founding Titan. Gohan was swarmed. He blasted them away, vaporizing bodies, but they kept coming. It was a wall of flesh. In the chaos, Reiner and Bertolt escaped. They abandoned Eren because they had to survive the horde. They ran for the wall. Gohan tried to pursue, but the sheer volume of Titans blocked his path. He had to choose again. Chase the enemy or protect the retreating scouts who were now retreating with Eren. He looked at the retreating warriors. He memorized their energy signatures. "I will find you," he promised, "and I will end this." The retreat back to the wall was grim. They had Eren back, but the cost was astronomical. Most of the veterans were dead. Erwin had lost an arm. Hung was critically injured. And Gohan had lost something too. He sat on top of the wall that night, watching the stars. The hunger was back, gnawing at him, but he ignored it. He was thinking about the choice he made. He had saved Erwin. He had saved the scouts. But Reiner and Bertolt, the mass murderers, were still alive. They would come back. They always came back. Eren walked up to him. Eren was wrapped in a blanket, shivering from shock. He sat next to Gohan. "You could have killed them," Eren said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Gohan looked at his hands. They were clean of blood, but they felt dirty. "I don't know," Gohan whispered. "I hesitated. I thought if I just talked to them." "They aren't people," Eren said, his voice hard and brittle. "Not anymore. Next time, Gohan, promise me, you won't treat them like people." Gohan looked at Eren. He saw the hate in his friend's eyes. It was the same hate Gohan had felt for Cell. He nodded slowly. "I promise," Gohan said. But as he said it, he felt a chill. He realized that by making that promise, he was stepping further away from the gentle boy Goku had raised. He was becoming a soldier of the walls. And in this world, soldiers didn't have the luxury of mercy. Far away, on top of Wall Maria, the beast Titan sat waiting. Beside him, a blond man emerged from the steam of the cart Titan. Zeke adjusted his glasses. "So," Zeke said, looking at the battered Reiner and Bertolt. "The little alien is soft. He saves people. How interesting." Zeke smiled, a cruel, intellectual smile. "We can use that. A weapon that cares about collateral damage is easy to disarm. We just have to give him a choice, his morals or his victory." The convergence was coming, and Gohan was no longer the unknown variable. He was the target. The moon over Wall Maria was a sliver of bone in a black sky, offering no comfort to the soldiers standing on the precipice of retaking their world. The operation to reclaim Shiganshina began in a silence so profound it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Gohan stood on top of the wall, his cape fluttering in the cold wind. He looked different than the boy who had arrived in Trost months ago. He had grown, not just in height, but in presence. His purple gi was now reinforced with scout leather, patches of the wings of freedom sewn onto the shoulders. His hair was slightly longer, sharper, spiking up with the natural aggression that matched the hard set of his jaw. He wasn't looking at the stars anymore. He was looking at the ruins of the town below, his senses extended to their absolute limit, sweeping the grid of dark streets with the spark of an enemy soul. He could feel them. They were faint, suppressed, hiding their energy like predators in high grass. But to a Z fighter, life energy was as loud as a drumbeat. He felt the cold, calculating hum of the beast Titan waiting in the distance. He felt the nervous, jagged rhythm of Reiner Braun hiding somewhere close, and he felt the dormant, massive pressure of the colossal Titan. Bertolt, waiting to fall like a judgment. Gohan touched the pouch at his belt. It contained dried rations, his only fuel. He ate a piece of hardtack, the dry crunch echoing in his skull. He needed the calories. He knew this battle would require everything. Erwin Smith stood beside him, his empty right sleeve pinned to his chest. The commander looked like a ghost who had refused to fade away. He looked at Gohan. He didn't ask if the boy was ready. He simply nodded. Gohan nodded back. The plan was simple on paper and suicide in practice. They would seal the gates to trap the enemy, then eliminate them. But Gohan knew plans in this world lasted until the first drop of blood hit the ground. The scouts descended. The operation began with speed. Eren transformed, hardening his Titan skin to plug the outer gate. It worked perfectly, too perfectly. Gohan hovered above the inner gate, watching Armin Arlert direct the search for Reiner. Armin was sweating, his eyes darting around the wall structure. Gohan floated down to him. He put a hand on Armin's shoulder. He pointed to a section of the wall that looked identical to the rest. He whispered that there was a heart beating inside that stone. Armin didn't question him. He fired a flare. Reiner burst from the wall, killing a scout instantly as he emerged. Levi moved like a blur, his blades slicing through the air, aiming for Reiner's neck before he could transform. He was fast, faster than human eyes could track, but Reiner was desperate. He shifted his consciousness into his body, surviving the lethal strike, and lightning struck the wall. The armored Titan fell to the ground, roaring a challenge that shook the remaining glass in the windows of Shiganshina. Gohan's aura flared white. He prepared to dive, to end Reiner in seconds as he had promised Eren. But a sound from the north stopped him. It was a boom, like atmospheric thunder. Gohan looked up. A line of green light appeared on the horizon. Dozens of flashes, Titans. An entire army of Titans materialized instantly, forming a semicircle around the northern side of the city. And standing in the center, towering over them, was the Beast Titan. Zeke Yeager had arrived. He didn't attack immediately. He picked up a massive boulder and crushed it in his hand, letting the gravel rain down. He looked directly at the wall, at the small figure glowing with energy. He shouted, his voice amplified by the Titan's vocal cords booming across the field. He called out to the warrior from the stars. He said he wanted to talk. Erwin ordered the troops to hold. He looked at Gohan. He told him to listen. Gohan floated forward, stopping 50 meters from the Beast Titan. The distance was nothing to him. He could cross it in a blink. Zeke smiled, showing sharp teeth. He asked Gohan why he fought for a race of devils. He said this world was a mistake, a history of blood that needed to be sterilized. He spoke of mercy killing, of ending the cycle of hatred by ending the people who carried it. Gohan listened to the twisted philosophy. It reminded him of Frieza, but with a veneer of intellectual sorrow that made it sickening. He told Zeke that nobody had the right to decide who lived or died based on history. He said people could change. Zeke sighed. He looked disappointed. He said that was the naivety of someone who hadn't seen enough history. Then he raised his hand. The trap was sprung. Zeke didn't throw the rock at Gohan. He threw it high into the air. It wasn't an attack, it was a signal. From the sky, a barrel was thrown from the back of the cart Titan, arcing high over the wall, aiming for the center of the city where the scouts were engaging Reiner. Gohan looked up. He sensed the energy inside the barrel. It was Berthold. Gohan realized the play. It was a nuke. If Berthold transformed in mid-air, the explosion would wipe out the city, the horses on the other side of the wall, and every soldier within a mile. Gohan had a choice. He could attack the Beast Titan now, or he could try to stop the bomb. He didn't hesitate. He turned and flew toward the city, breaking the sound barrier. The sonic boom shattered the ground beneath him. Zeke watched him go and adjusted his glasses. He muttered that speed was useless if you had to be in two places at once. Gohan reached the airspace above the city just as the barrel began to open. He saw Berthold's eyes. They were sad, resigned. Gohan didn't try to catch the barrel. He knew the transformation was triggered. He did the only thing he could. He flared his energy to its maximum, creating a sphere of golden ki around himself, and he flew directly into the expanding light of the transformation. The explosion was blinding. A mushroom cloud of steam and fire rose over Shiganshina, visible for miles. The shockwave flattened houses, stripped the tiles off roofs, and sent soldiers tumbling like leaves. But the devastation was contained. Gohan's barrier had absorbed the initial kinetic force of the blast. He had wrapped the explosion in his own energy, compressing it. Inside the epicenter, Gohan screamed. The heat was absolute. He was holding back a nuclear event with his bare hands. His skin scorched. His GI disintegrated. The pressure was crushing his internal organs. He couldn't hold it forever. He aimed the force upward, channeling the blast into a pillar of fire that shot into the stratosphere instead of spreading outward. When the light faded, the colossal Titan stood in the center of a crater of glass. Gohan fell from the sky, landing on a rooftop near the wall. He was smoking. His body was red and blistered. He gasped for air, his lungs burning. He had saved the city from total annihilation, but the colossal Titan was still there, and it was burning hot. Berthold looked down at the tiny, burned figure. He didn't attack. He started wrecking the city, sweeping his arms through buildings, setting everything on fire. He was ignoring Gohan. He was drawing the attention of Eren and the squad. On the other side of the wall, the situation was catastrophic. Zeke began his bombardment. He wasn't throwing warning shots anymore. He was pitching crushed rocks like a shotgun blast. The first volley shredded the front line of the scouts. Men and horses were turned into red mist. The sound of the impacts was like a hammer hitting wet meat. It was a slaughter. Levi stood next to Irvin behind the last line of houses. They were pinned. If they moved, they died. If they stayed, they died. Irvin looked at the carnage. He looked at the Beast Titan, who was laughing, enjoying the game. Irvin made his decision. The devil's gamble. He explained the plan to Levi. A suicide charge. They would ride straight into the gunfire to distract the beast, allowing Levi to flank him. Gohan, recovering on the wall, sensed the shift in intent. He dragged himself up. He looked toward the field. He saw the green smoke flares. He saw the scouts mounting their horses. He saw Irvin at the front. "No," Gohan whispered. "Don't do it." But they did. The soldiers screamed. Not a scream of victory, but a scream of rage against the dying of the light. They rode out from cover. Zeke looked at them with disgust. He called it a waste. He prepared another pitch. Gohan watched the rocks fly. He saw them hit. He saw heads explode. He saw bodies torn in half. He saw Erwin Smith, the man who had gambled everything for truth, get hit in the stomach, falling from his horse. The charge didn't stop. The soldiers kept riding, kept screaming, riding over the bodies of their friends. Something inside Gohan broke. It wasn't the snap of a rubber band. It was the shattering of a lock, the hesitation, the fear of his own power, the desire to be a scholar, the need to find a peaceful solution. It all evaporated in the heat of the slaughter. He realized that Zeke was right about one thing. Talk was cheap, but Zeke was wrong about the solution. The solution wasn't sterilization. It was judgment. Gohan didn't scream. He didn't power up with a long, drawn-out yell. He simply vanished. Zeke was reaching for another rock when he felt a pressure on his shoulder. He thought it was a fly. He turned his massive head. Gohan was standing on the Beast Titan's shoulder. The boy was burned. His clothes were rags, but his eyes were teal flames. There was no mercy in them. There was no humanity. There was only the cold, hard gaze of a Saiyan warrior. "You like throwing the rocks?" Gohan asked. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the battlefield noise. Zeke panicked. He tried to grab Gohan. Gohan didn't dodge. He kicked the Beast Titan's hand. The hand didn't just break, it exploded. Fingers flew off like shrapnel. Zeke roared in pain and confusion. This power, it was impossible. He had calculated the boy's limits based on the Trost reports. This was different. This was exponential. Gohan walked up the Beast Titan's arm. He moved with a terrifying casualness. He kicked the elbow joint, snapping the arm backward. Zeke fell to his knees. He tried to harden his nape. Gohan stopped at the neck. He looked down at the nape. "Get out," Gohan said. Zeke didn't get out. He tried to bite. Gohan punched the Beast Titan in the jaw. The entire lower jaw detached. The Beast Titan collapsed face first into the dirt. Gohan reached down, tore through the hardened skin like it was wet paper, and grabbed Zeke by the collar of his shirt. He ripped him out of the Titan body. Zeke Yeager, the genius tactician, the war chief, dangled in the air, held by an 11-year-old boy. Zeke was missing his glasses. He looked small. He looked pathetic. "You killed them," Gohan said. "For nothing." It was for the greater good," Zeke stammered, blood running down his face. "To save them from this cruel world." Gohan looked at the field of dead soldiers. He looked at Irvin's fallen horse. "The world is cruel," Gohan said. "But you made it worse." He raised his hand. Energy gathered in his palm. He was going to erase Zeke. He was going to finish it. Wait! The shout came from the ground. It was Levi. He was covered in Titan blood, panting. He had flanked the beast, only to find the work already done. Don't kill him. We need his power. We need someone to eat him. Gohan paused. The energy in his hand flickered. He looked at Levi. He looked at Zeke. The logic of war clashed with his rage. Keeping Zeke alive meant someone else had to become a monster to eat him. It meant perpetuating the cycle. But killing him meant losing the asset. While Gohan hesitated, the cart Titan, which had been hiding under the corpse of a dead Titan, lunged. It was fast, quadrupedal, and its mouth was open wide. It didn't aim for Gohan. It aimed for Zeke. It snatched Zeke from Gohan's grip, biting gently to secure him, and sprinted away. Gohan reacted instantly. He fired a blast, but the cart Titan was erratic, zigzagging through the steam of the decaying Titans. And Gohan was tired. His aim was off by a fraction. The blast scorched the cart Titan's flank but didn't stop it. The enemy was escaping. Gohan prepared to fly after them, but a massive explosion from the city drew his attention. The colossal Titan had been defeated. Gohan turned back to the city. He saw the steam clearing. He saw Eren cutting Bertholdt out of the nape. But he also saw a blackened, charred body lying on a roof nearby. It was Armin. Gohan flew back to the wall, leaving Levi to deal with the remaining Titans. He landed on the roof where Eren was kneeling over Armin. Armin was burned beyond recognition. He was barely breathing. His skin was charcoal, but he was alive, just barely. Mikasa was there, weeping. Eren was frantic. He was screaming for the serum. He knew Levi had the Titan serum. If they gave it to Armin, he could eat Bertholdt and survive. Levi landed on the roof. He limped. He was battered. He held the small box containing the syringe. He looked at Armin. He looked at Eren. He prepared to hand over the serum. But then, Flock arrived. He was dragging a body. It was Erwin Smith. The commander was gutted, missing an arm, bleeding out, but his heart was still beating. Flock was screaming that the devil had to live, that only a devil could lead them against the world. The choice. Gohan stood back. He felt the life forces of both men. They were fading rapidly, like candles in a wind tunnel. Armin was a bright, curious spark. Erwin was a roaring fire that had burned itself down to the embers. Eren and Mikasa drew their blades against Levi. They demanded the serum for Armin. Flock pointed his gun at them. It was a standoff over the corpses of the saviors. Gohan walked into the center of the circle. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need to. He placed his hand on Eren's blade and pushed it down. He placed his other hand on Flock's gun and lowered it. "Stop," Gohan said. His voice was raspy from the smoke. "Fighting won't save them." He looked at Levi. "You have to choose." Levi looked down at Gohan. "Who is stronger?" Levi asked. "Who saves humanity?" Gohan looked at Armin. He saw the boy who dreamed of the sea. He saw the strategic mind that had exposed Annie, that had planned the Colossal's defeat. Then he looked at Erwin. He saw the man who had led the charge into hell, the man who had enslaved himself to a dream of truth. "Erwin is the past," Gohan said softly. "He gave everything to get us here. But Armin is the future. He looks beyond the walls." Levi looked at Erwin. He saw the peace on the dying commander's face. Erwin had raised his hand in his delirium, asking a question in a classroom that didn't exist anymore. Levi realized that bringing Erwin back would be cruel. It would be dragging him back into the hell he had finally escaped. Levi made his choice. He injected Armin. The transformation was violent. Armin turned into a mindless titan. He grabbed the screaming Berthold. Gohan watched. He didn't look away. He watched as Berthold pleaded for help. He watched as his former friend, the quiet boy from the warrior unit, was crunched between the teeth of the new colossal titan. It was gruesome. It was necessary. It was the price of survival. Gohan felt a tear roll down his cheek. It evaporated instantly on his hot skin. He had won. They had retaken the wall. But the victory felt like ashes in his mouth. Reiner had escaped. Zeke had escaped. Irvin was dead. Hundreds were dead. And Armin had just eaten a person. The sun began to set. The survivors gathered on top of the wall. There were only 9 of them left from the hundreds who had set out. The silence was heavy. Gohan sat on the edge, his legs swinging over the abyss. He looked at his hands. They were trembling again, not from hunger this time, but from the weight of what he was becoming. Days later, after the fires were out and the dead were buried, they went to the basement. Eren used the key. The door opened. It was a normal study. Books, dust, a desk. Gohan sensed nothing magical here. No great weapon. Just paper. They found the false bottom in the desk drawer. They found the books. And they found the photograph. A picture of a man, a woman, and a child, standing in front of a clean wall, wearing clothes that looked like the clothes from Gohan's world. They read the journals. They learned the truth. Humanity wasn't extinct. The world outside the walls wasn't a wasteland of titans. It was a vast, modern civilization. Airships, photographs, nations. And they hated the people of the walls. They called them devils. They kept them in a pen to be punished for the sins of their ancestors. Gohan stood in the basement, holding the book. He read about Mali. He read about the internment zones. He realized that the enemy wasn't a monster. The enemy was the world. He felt a profound sense of isolation. He was an alien on a planet that was at war with itself. He looked at Eren. He saw the change happen in real time. Eren wasn't looking at the book with wonder. He was looking at it with a hatred so cold, it lowered the temperature in the room. "We're not free," Eren whispered. "The ocean isn't freedom. It's just another wall. And the enemy is on the other side." Gohan walked out of the basement. He climbed the stairs to the ruined street of Shiganshina. He looked up at the sky. It was the same sky as his Earth, but the stars felt different, crueler. He clenched his fist. He had power. He had enough power to conquer Mali. He could fly across the ocean and destroy their fleets. He could force them to stop. He could be the god of this world. But that was what Cell would do. That was what Frieza would do. "Dad," Gohan whispered to the silence. "What am I supposed to do?" There was no answer, only the wind whistling through the hole in the wall. The survival horror story had become a war story, and Gohan, the boy who wanted to be a scholar, was now the greatest weapon in a global conflict. He had survived the convergence, but he had lost his innocence. He had learned that sometimes, to save the sheep, you have to kill the wolf, and sometimes you have to let the shepherd die. The scouts returned to the interior. They were hailed as heroes, but when the people cheered, Gohan didn't wave. He walked with his head down, his eyes shadowed. He was thinking about the ocean. He was thinking about the enemies across the sea. And for the first time, he wasn't thinking about how to save them. He was thinking about how to win. The winter passed in a blur of grey snow and grim labor, with the executioner, called Gohan, patrolling the skies. The remaining titans inside Wall Maria were hunted to extinction within months. It was not a battle. It was a liquidation. The sound of sonic booms became as common as the wind, a daily reminder that the walls were no longer a cage. but a fortress guarded by a god. When spring finally broke the frost, the Survey Corps rode out for the final expedition, not to fight, but to verify the silence. They rode past the graveyards of the giants, past the bones steaming in the sun, until the grass turned to sand and the air turned to salt. They stood atop the massive dune that blocked the horizon. For Armin, this was the moment of validation, the proof that the book in his grandfather's attic was not a lie. He ran down the slope, his boots kicking up white sand, screaming with a joy that felt foreign in this world of blood. Mikasa followed, her scarf fluttering, her face softening for the first time in years. They splashed into the surf, tasting the brine, laughing at the sheer, impossible vastness of the blue water that stretched into infinity. Gohan did not run. He hovered a few inches above the sand, drifting down the dune like a phantom. He landed at the water's edge and let the foam wash over his boots. He looked out at the ocean. It looked exactly like the ocean on his Earth. It smelled the same. The cry of the seagulls was the same. A painful memory of Kame House, of Master Roshi, of a time when the biggest worry was a training regime, pierced his heart. He closed his eyes and breathed in the sea air. He was 12 years old now, but he felt ancient. He had killed more sentient beings in the last year than most soldiers did in a lifetime. Eren Yeager walked past him. Eren did not look at the water with wonder. He looked at it with recognition. He walked until the water was up to his waist, soaking his uniform. He stood there, staring at the line where the sea met the sky. Armin called out to him, talking about the future, about the lands beyond. But Eren raised his hand, pointing a trembling finger across the waves. I thought, if we made it here, we would be free, Eren said, his voice flat and dead. But I was wrong. Over there is the enemy. Gohan walked into the water. He stood next to Eren. The two of them, the boy who could destroy the world and the boy who hated it, stood shoulder to shoulder against the tide. Gohan looked in the direction Eren was pointing. He could sense them. Millions of energy signatures. Across the water, there were cities, armies, and people who hated them. People who wanted to drop bombs on them. If we kill them all, Eren asked, turning his green eyes to Gohan, does that mean we'll be free? Gohan looked at the horizon. He thought of the androids. He thought of Cell. He thought of the lesson he had learned in the ruins of Shiganshina. Peace was not given. It was enforced. He didn't tell Eren that killing was wrong. He didn't tell him to have hope. Gohan's eyes hardened, the teal green shifting to a cold electric blue. We will do what we have to do, Gohan whispered. We won't wait for them to come to us. We'll take the war to them. The waves crashed against them, washing away the footprints they had left in the sand. But the path they had chosen was carved in stone. The timeline had shifted irrevocably. The defenders of the walls were gone. The devils of Paradise were coming.